Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and today it is finally time for us to review Travis Strikes Again, No More Heroes on the Nintendo Switch. This review was originally written by the wonderfully enigmatic Gavin Lane and has been adapted for video by me. But anyway, that's more than enough waffling. Let's dive right into things. We haven't heard so much as a peep from the otaku assassin Travis Touchdown since he last graced our glorious screens in 2010's No More Heroes 2, Desperate Struggle. Brainchild of the wonderfully charismatic and all-round lovely man Goichi Suda51 Suda, Travis cut a stylish sway through the Wii's catalogue of otherwise casual fodder. That same infectious energy is alive and well in Travis Strikes Again No More Heroes, the latest game from Grasshopper, and it's great to see Suda51 finally back in the director's chair for the first time since the original game on the Wii. This is not a straight-up sequel though, it's more positioned as an indie-spirited accompaniment to the main series. It was developed by a much smaller team, and it picks up the story years after the events of No More Heroes 2. Travis has been living the dream that only he can imagine, traveling around the US in a house-sized trailer, basically doing nothing but playing video games. I'm not jealous at all. Despite this nomadic existence, Badman, who is the vengeful father of No More Heroes' dearly departed bad girl, has finally tracked him down, but both are mysteriously sucked into the world of Electric Thunder Tiger 2, Travis's only game for the legendary Death Drive Mark II prototype console that he's got his hands on, and that's the weirdest sentence I've ever said. Forced into a difficult situation, they strike up an uneasy alliance and end up having to enter 5 other games as well, arriving Terminator style before hacking and slashing their way through static-infested enemies known as the Bug Street Boys, because of course they are. The cel-shaded aesthetic thankfully remains from previous entries, as it was, well, it's pretty important to the whole thing. Everything is in 3D, along with a fixed viewpoint that changes in every section, from top down to side on, with various angles in between, all without player input. It's very arcadey. Controls are similarly simple. B is jump, and you've got light and heavy strikes split across the Y and X buttons respectively, and a rolling dodge with A. Travis's appropriately badass beam sword depletes with every swing though, and must be recharged by clicking in the left stick and shaking the right Joy-Con, a familiar action to fans of the previous games, and don't think too much about it. If motion's not your thing though, you can also just waggle the right joystick after clicking the left stick in to do that instead, which actually is a really good thing, because if you've got limited movement, yeah, it's not a good time. It's also really handy in handheld mode. Holding L and hitting a face button unleashes a variety of assignable skills that you collect and unlock along the way, from lightning bolts to defensive barriers, or summon spots that interact with enemies or replenish your health. Basically lots of special goodness. Presets of these skills can be saved and loaded from the pause menu if that particularly tickles your pickle. These skills naturally recharge at different rates, and so combat relies very heavily on you making sure that you use these to their full effect, and at the same time making sure you don't try to use them when you haven't got enough charge. It's absolutely imperative to experiment with them and find out what exactly suits your playstyle, and then sticking with it, I suppose. Although each of the 6 Death Drive games have a different theme, Travis's hack and slash gameplay is consistent across the board. There are specific sections that ape on other styles or games in particular, and there are some great surprises that we're not going to talk about here so as not to spoil it. But to give you sort of a broad idea, the second game intersperses a series of murder houses with a top-down suburban neighborhood on rotatable tiles, each bringing some light puzzling to the mix. Another one of these death ball games, because yeah, they don't come on cartridges, they come on balls, which, yeah, sees you exploring a spooky mansion in search of damn fine coffee and donuts. This is a real thing. The gimmicks undoubtedly raise a smile, and while some are stronger than others, the base gameplay is satisfying enough to keep you going through the less inspired sections. Save points, toilets, are scattered throughout, and enemies evolve quickly from lowly drones to shield-wielding variants and beyond. Crowd control becomes not only important but absolutely necessary, and you'll need to prioritize baddie spawning skulls before dealing with the horde. They inevitably get a little bit repetitive, and although mid-bosses provide some comedy, they're not immensely interesting fights. Hack-and-slash veterans will have little trouble on standard difficulty. Thankfully, there's more than standard difficulty. Main bosses as well are a very entertaining lot, but they're still pretty standard. It's slick and stylish fun, but TSA NMH lacks the depth of more complex fighters like Bayonetta and God of War and stuff like that. We spent a majority of our time as Travis, but the baseball bat wielding Badman is available at almost any time from the pause menu if you so wish. He's got his own individual XP, levels, bespoke skills. He's basically a different character to play as, which is nice. The game also boasts drop-in, drop-out single-screen co-op with a single Joy-Con as well. But by that I mean you need a Joy-Con each. But only one. And the simple controls and mechanics lend them well to teaming up with less experienced players. Mechanics aside for a moment though, Travis Strikes Again's presentation is nothing short of intoxicating. Every quote-unquote game is introduced with a crackling CRT static and presented in 4:3 aspect ratio, which is how we used to watch things back in the day. And the rest of the more modern 16:9 aspect ratio is taken up with information, and basically it's your HUD. It's a complete cacophony of 80s neon, pop art, Spielberg films on VHS, and of course video games. It's all a complete and utter beautiful mess. On paper you could say that it sounds like a reconstituted Ready Player One, but it's got far more bite than that, and Grasshopper's self-awareness prevents it from becoming a spot-the-referenced box-ticking exercise. An eclectic soundtrack mixes classic techno with twangy hillbilly guitar and smooth chill-out. This all sounds like it shouldn't work, and I don't know how, but it all really does. Jokes about budget constraints, spiraling localization costs, and fighting against system specs will tickle anyone familiar with game development, or just anybody who likes games and knows that they need to be made. Characters worry about gamers expecting an action game and not wanting a buttload of text. It's all very self-aware, and I'm so pleased because if it was done badly, it would suck, but it's done very, very well. They even go so far as to ponder the importance of their Metacritic score. Yep, that's how far down the rabbit hole we've gone. Grasshopper explores the dashed hopes and frustrations of game development, coming close to eating its own tail sometimes, but it's never less than entertaining. In between games, you'll hang out in Travis's trailer, a sort of hub world where you have a shop where you can buy some new t-shirts, a bathroom where you can put them on, a toilet where you can save your game, and of course, a PC to access blogs about ramen. The t-shirts also take things to another level entirely, by most of them representing other independent video games that are available on the Nintendo Switch. As you can probably see, I myself am rocking a rather fetching Hollow Knight one, but you can pick your own. For all its Tarantino-esque reverence though, we never found it grating or try hard. This isn't a game of knowing references or thematic nods to Spielberg's style. It gets up on the table, demolishes the fourth wall and shouts, "Everything is awesome!" Its references are in your face, with enemy names including Spielbug, Sodabug, and Zuckerbug, and genuine rather than affections that broadcast nerd credentials, shoving Grasshopper's tastes down our throats with not so much as a by your leave. It's unpretentious and wonderfully inclusive, a sort of Lego movie-like celebration, but of video games instead. And thanks to that generous spirit, you tend to let its shortcomings slide, instead sitting back and enjoying the ride rather than dwelling on invisible walls, finicky platforming, or repetitive enemy types. Instead, you're opening up the archive section and reading fantastic area-appropriate reviews for tips, or enjoying the interstitial globe-trotting narrative via an ASCII-style text adventure. It's absolutely pitch perfect, anticipating the player's thoughts and mood, and it's willing to poke fun at itself and the limitations of the medium. Suda-san seems content to let his video games be video games, so despite all the intertextual references, you'll spend your time playing Travis Strikes Again, unlike certain other game series. Although we had 16 hours on the in-game clock when the credits rolled, exploring, dawdling, and note-taking probably inflated this by about 5 or 6 hours. There are collectibles and hidden characters to go back for. How else are you going to procure all those natty t-shirts, eh? And more importantly, spicy difficulty unlocks upon completion. Plenty to keep you busy then, and we're eagerly awaiting the DLC. Billed as a side dish, Travis Strikes Again No More Heroes has been prepared with enough love and affection perfection to become a filling meal on its own, packed with all the spice and spirit you'd expect from Travis Touchdown. It's a fun, indie-influenced blast of hack and slash which doesn't change the world mechanically, and don't go in expecting No More Heroes 3, but its sincerity and energy are undeniably charming. It's an adult game, a game player's game, foul-mouthed and dripping with style. If you're sitting on the fence, we'd recommend diving in, if only to support its infectious celebratory spirit. Suda51 seems to have a real affection for Nintendo hardware, and this makes you feel lucky we have him working on Switch. Alright, rambly time now. This is my own personal thoughts if you're new to the channel. This is where I just go off on one and just chat about it. Because I can. When I first heard about this game, I wasn't exactly bowled over by the idea of it. I must admit, I never really played No More Heroes beforehand, and I was a little bit like, is it a little bit too, is it just trying too hard and stuff like that? But I'm so pleased that it really, really isn't. The first time I played it was back at EGX Rezzed, which I think at the time of recording was... No, it was only last year. And he said 2 years ago. That would have been terrifying. And back then I had a couple of, little issues with the game that, sort of go beyond what was already discussed in the review. And it's interesting to see that they have actually been rectified as time has gone on. One of the things that I remember asking, because I managed to even interview Suda-san, was about the recharging your sword required motion controls back then. And now they've changed it so that it doesn't. And I think that that was a very good decision because, of course, there are some people with limited mobility, or maybe you're using a controller that doesn't have motion controls in it. Basically, it's always good to include motion controls, I think, where it's appropriate, but also absolutely imperative to offer an alternative, and I'm very pleased they did that. The game is just ridiculously good fun, it's self-referential, it's not taking itself seriously. Don't go in expecting, Dante's Inferno or anything like that, by which I mean the poem, not the game. Don't think about the game. I sort of feel that this is, in a way, and this isn't a perfect analogy, but it's kind of like the Pacific Rim of video games. It's self-aware, it's brilliantly made, but it's not trying to be Titanic. It's not trying to be the new God of War. It's just trying to be its own thing. It's not taking itself seriously, and frankly, if you just like a good hack and slash and you're into the sort of the culture and you're old enough to know what an erection is, then yeah, I'd say absolutely get this game. I had so much fun with it, and I'm looking forward to having even more with it. But that's all I've got to say on the matter, because pretty much the review pretty much covered my feelings well, so bye!